Okay, one of the committees is the Durability Committee, and I'd like to give a brief report on that. The initial charge of this committee was to develop statistics and hopefully an index which informs breeders as to which stallions and sire lines rise above the national average in terms of durability and by implication soundness. Once this is established, the committee hopes to develop strategies to reward durability and to encourage industry publications to include durability data in their regular sire lists. We began with the hypothesis that the American thoroughbred of today is not as sound and durable as, say, 30 or 40 years ago, or even more recently. Admittedly, this is not a universally accepted hypothesis. For example, you might recall from ESPN's special on racing that aired last year, at least one university geneticist expressed doubt that in a gene pool as large as the thoroughbreds, there could not have been substantive loss of genetic durability or soundness in such a short time. However, statistics of the breed lead one to think that durability and soundness have been diminishing year by year. You are probably familiar with the statistics publicized by the Jockey Club. Average starts per year per horse down from 11 in 1960 to about 6. And we found these declines are relatively even through the rank and file. It is not only the stakes horses that are starting less. Claimers and allowance horses have also experienced declines at relatively similar rates. There are other ways to express the trend. For example, in the foal crop of 1965, the average starter made a career total of starts of 35 and raced for more than 3 years. In recent crops, the average starter has made about half that many starts, 17 or so, and raced less than 3 years. Also, there is the fact that in 1954, 30% of all starters raced at least 16 times that year, and nearly half the starters ran at least a dozen times. Today, only 4% of starters race as many as 16 times in a year, and only 18% as many as 12. In addition to such figures, we had the heartfelt testament and experience of experienced breeders encouraging the thought that the breed is weakening. When a Seth Hancock would sit up here at this table in October of 2006 and tell the summit that even he feels he is raising a less sound and durable horse, it underscored that professionals in the field of breeding believe we have a problem. As Dr. Larry Bramlage has tended to express it in some of our newsletters, we do not select for durability and soundness, we select more for speed and brilliance, so it is no surprise that durability and soundness could be diminished. So our Durability Committee based its actions on the hypothesis rather than dither around about whether it was real or not. Jimmy Bell of Darley suggested we look for stallions with the best durability results. So the committee began to contemplate what statistics would help highlight the qualities of durability and soundness. As you know, what happens on the racetrack is not the only thing that might have happened. The cliche about the insanity meaning doing the same thing and expecting different results doesn't apply to horse racing. If you put a field of 12 horses in there to race a mile with the exact same conditions, insanity would be to expect the 12 to go exactly the same twice in a row. So, race results are not a straight line measure of genetic qualities of each runner, but are an amalgam of many factors. Training agendas and trainer quality, jockeyship, track surface, post position, racing luck, the possibility of accidental injury, quality of feeding, and astute overall husbandry have their effects on how a horse's career plays out. The racing record shows what happens, but does not define in cast iron terms the only result that could have happened. Nevertheless, racing results are how we keep score. We decided that two key measures of durability and soundness in the stallion's collective progeny are, 1, the average number of starts of his offspring, and 2, the percentage that actually gets to the races and makes at least one start. We looked for horses whose progeny at records exceed the national norms of about 17 starts per horse and about 70% of registered foals getting to the races. As you would expect, if the average number of starts for all horses had been going down, those stallions with the better statistics in this measure were the older ones. Our initial computer printout from the Jockey Club information systems produced a nostalgic list dominated by a lot of dead stallions that had a few runners still running. This was academically interesting, but very difficult to put into use if you're a breeder. Eventually, we found the balance between the lifelong stats of deceased and aging horses with usable stats of active horses by looking at animals whose first crop raced in 1993 or later. Then we circulated this list to the media and to all state breeders' associations. This did not turn out to reveal any magical subset of the American thoroughbred with massively better statistics than their peers. However, there were enough impressive statistics that came to light that we were encouraged that our two measures of durability were meaningful. From the beginning, we hoped that the end game would be to produce a mathematical formula which would express in one easily understood number a durability index. To do this, we employed a statistician working on her doctorate at the University of Kentucky, a young lady named Kimberly Brown. Working with her professor, she has met with the Durability Committee several times, and the committee is made up of professional horsemen and journalists with wide and varied experience. The challenge was to account for non-genetic influences which affect a stallion's progeny profile and correct for those. We all recognize, for example, that if you have an AP Indy filly who breaks her maiden at 2 and then suffers bone chips or a condylar fracture, you are far more likely to retire her right away and breed her than if she were by BP Indy or XYZ Indy. So the filly that filly becomes an artificial negative to the record of her sire, especially if her injury were caused by an accident and not by any inherent unsoundness. The higher priced horses are, the more fashionable their pedigrees. The expectation is that in the aggregate, their racing records would be shorter, not for genetic reasons, but for economic reasons. This is the challenge we've given to Ms. Brown and the committee. How do we correct for the various non-genetic pulls and tugs on the composite statistics of a horse's progeny? We recognized from the beginning that this was setting an idealistic goal. The Durability Committee, Durability Index that we develop, however it's struck, must be accurate, it must be easily grasped, it must be designed so that the industry can quickly become familiar with it and how to use it. We see this index not as a standalone decision maker for breeders selecting sires, but as one more valid point for them to consider. And we recognize that it might turn out that this statistic is used more by breeders at certain levels of the industry than by breeders at the very top level. That in itself was not seen as a reason for us not to proceed. This work continues, and we look forward to keeping the industry informed on progress. The end game, of course, is to hope that we can have a more useful tool that will help us better utilize the qualities available in the American thoroughbred breeding stock. Thank you.